Now, this is a video I've wanted to film for a while. There are a couple different staples in some of my videos. One, like I mentioned, your location is the number one factor that determines how much money you can make as an Uber driver and as a Lyft driver. Two, I've talked before about what I like to call the 25-75 kind of issue, where 25% of drivers love driving for Uber and Lyft because of all the benefits we know: flexible schedule, instant cash outs, et cetera, et cetera. 75%, or definitely more than most, hate Uber and Lyft, and they hate driving for them. And there's one unique thing I want to talk about, and that is the unique spread in terms of income when it comes to drivers. And this is something I've noticed that's gotten both worse and better at the exact same time since I initially started driving in 2015. Because as we all know, first off, let's get it right out there, kind of calling out the elephant in the room. Drivers make way less now on average. I want to stress on average. Drivers make way less now on average than they did years ago. However, the spread of income in terms of making way less or way more has gotten way more polarized. And here's what I mean. Using a good analogy when it comes to, like, say, the middle class, if you think about it, like, say, decades ago, I'm making this super simple, there was, like, the low income class, middle class, upper class, right? Pretty simple. We all study this in economics and everything. However, over the years, and this has been shown in different economic reports, just in terms of the economy and everything, the middle class is shrinking, where it seems like there's either more low income class, then a huge jump, and then you have the upper class, the high end class. So it's interesting that you either have a situation in a weird way that the poorer are getting poorer, the richer are getting richer, and the middle class is just slowly dwindling a lot. This is something I have noticed when it comes to Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. That, like I said, on average, drivers get paid way less than they ever did before. Going a step further, though, even though, yes, about 75% of drivers, like I said, hate driving for Lyft and Uber, and remember, your location is a big factor when it comes to this, they hate it because they make way less than before, and that, of course, makes sense. However, what I have noticed is that about 25% of drivers absolutely love it, and what's interesting and almost unbelievable to a lot of drivers, they make more money than they ever did before. I remember when I first started driving in 2015, not many drivers really complained about the pay. The pay was great. It just came out. There's a lot more benefits, in my opinion, in terms of, I just felt like they treated the drivers more fairly, et cetera, right? And then over the years, drivers have been getting paid less. However, I find that especially now, drivers in some areas, and I'd say about 25% of drivers, are making way more than ever before. And this almost seems fake. As you can imagine, I've gotten a lot of comments on this channel of people saying, like, Mark, there's no way drivers can make over 100K as a driver. Yes, they can. There's no way drivers can make $600 to $800 in just one day of driving. Yes, they can. And here's where things get even more kind of annoying. It's not that they can't, it's that you can't. And that's not, of course, offense to anybody, but it's the fact that your location, like I've said numerous times, is such an important factor. One, in terms of the logistics of your location, are you an independent contractor or employee? Number two, but number three, and I just did a video about this, about one of the biggest ways, if not the biggest way, to make the most amount of money driving now is the bonuses. And what I've noticed in about 75% of areas, let's say, that are just horrible places to drive, not only can you make, I don't know, $8-9 an hour, but the bonuses are kind of trash. They might say, oh, you know what? For this weekend, we're gonna step our game up and we're gonna pay you an extra $3 an hour. And you might be like, okay, that's kind of cool. If I say I get paid $9 an hour on average, that's like a 30% raise, but I'm still making $12 an hour. Meanwhile, there are drivers in other areas that are making consistently 30, 35 plus an hour because their area, not only is it a good place to drive in general, but the bonuses are just so ridiculous. And that is something I've noticed, that the spread of income when it comes to Uber drivers and Lyft drivers has become way more polarized, and it seems to be continuing down that trend as well. It seems like that the drivers who don't make that much money are making even less and less and less each year, which is horrible. And then you have drivers on the other end, which is really interesting. I guess this is a positive aspect, that the drivers who are making a lot of money are continuing to make a lot of money, and sometimes even more than they were the year before, and the year before that, et cetera, et cetera. And on this channel, you may notice, especially if you look at the amazing aspect that is YouTube comments, that there's a lot of comment wars. And I'd say maybe about 95% of the comments will say, hey, Mark, I hate Lyft and Uber. I think these drivers are faking it. I actually did a video about that. These drivers got to be faking it. There's no way that people can make 100K. Lyft and Uber is the worst place to work for, et cetera, et cetera. And taking a quick side note, one thing I did learn in psychology, which is something that's always stuck with me, is that being uncomfortable is a lack of comfort, but not the other way around. What I mean is, even though it sounds like a bit of the same thing, what I mean is this. Let's say you walk into a room and it's room temperature. You don't think, oh, this is room temperature. You just don't think about it at all, right? You're comfortable. Comfortability is not the lack of uncomfortability, it's the other way around. So for example, if let's say you then walk into a room that's super hot or super cold, you might walk in and be like, oh, it's freezing. Or you might walk in and say, oh my God, I'm already like sweating, right? It's super hot. That's because you're uncomfortable, which is lack of comfort, not the other way around. So now bringing that back to comments, and this is true, I think, for not just Lyft and Uber, but I don't know, maybe Amazon reviews, or I guess Amazon's kind of its own thing. But like I think for most reviews, take Yelp, for example, if let's say you have a good time at a restaurant, you're more likely than not going to go give it a review. Unless you have like an unbelievable time, you're just going to not think about it. However, if you go to a restaurant or you go out to a venue or whatever, and you have a horrible time, you're way more likely to leave a review. Likewise, I've noticed, bringing it now back to this channel, I have noticed a lot of people saying tons of comments hating Lyft and Uber. And in some ways I agree with them, in some ways I disagree. Obviously, there's two sides to everything. But I think one thing I've just noticed overall is that one, because there's so many more drivers being paid way less than ever before, there's more drivers who are just mad. A lot of drivers hate Lyft and Uber now. But the second thing is, as you can imagine, getting these comments, I'm like, well, it makes sense that the people who hate it are more likely to speak up than the people who love it. But what's crazy, and again, I know this sounds almost fake or like I'm lying or exaggerating, on these videos, but the people who I have talked to, and I've interviewed tons of drivers all around the country, different parts of the world. I try to, if I can, read almost every comment on this channel when talking to drivers, like say in my DMs or when I'm going out, whatever the case is. There are about 25% of drivers who make really good money, like insane money, who love driving for Lyft and Uber. I mean, if you think about it, like say you did live in a good area. I remember I talked to one driver in Austin, Texas, for example, when I was there last year for South by Southwest. If let's say you lived in a good area to drive and you can make 100K on a flexible schedule where you have instant cash outs and you don't need a college degree, you don't have to go to a 4-year university, would you do that? I mean, yeah, like the median income, which is funny, for an accountant, that's what I studied in school, is about 75-ish K, yet you can make way more than that. Maybe not way more, I take that back, but I think 25K more is pretty awesome. But you can make either 75K as an accountant, getting the degree, spending years of school, being in debt from college and everything, or you can make 100K as just a driver where all you need is a driver's license, and that's it. That's all you need. And so overall, that's what I want to say, that as time goes on, the one thing that I'm just very curious to see, and there's a few things when it comes to Lyft and Uber that I've just been observing a lot, especially recently, is this spread. That there are drivers who say, I hate Lyft and Uber, and they're right because of how little they get paid. And there's also drivers who love Lyft and Uber because of how much money they get paid, and they're also right. Both parties are right. And I think this makes things so tricky that as the spread continues, as drivers continue to make even less money than before, and as some drivers continue to make potentially even more money than before, this is going to have a very unique thing to see how this scale weighs out when it comes to Lyft and Uber income overall.